Booking the Royal Rumble must be damn hard. Not only do you have to ensure the eventual winner looks strong, but you also have 29 other egos that need to be managed. Given that comedy spots are usually a given during the match, you also know that at least a handful are going to be asked to play the fool before they get hurled over the top rope. You also have to remember what the audience is expecting too. You can never please everyone, but being aware of the expectation, as we know, could be the most important aspect of the whole damn thing. If a fan favourite barely makes it 5 minutes, you run the risk of turning the crowd and never getting them back. Then it becomes fodder for lists like this, and that's happened way too many times. I'm Simon from WhatCulture, and this is 10 Royal Rumble eliminations that infuriated fans. Number 10, CM Punk and RVD. Try and work this one out if you can. The year is 2007. CM Punk and Rob Van Dam are well and truly in the hearts of fans everywhere, and now they're in the Royal Rumble. Guess who threw them out during that? Yes, you got it. It was the Great Khali. Arriving at number 28, WWE was still high on the tall man back then, and it became clear very quickly what was about to happen. To continue this push in what was designed to get Khali to the main event scene, within seconds he had turned his attention to Punk and Van Dam and got rid of them like they were roadkill. And sure, you can argue this made sense given how big Khali is. He could likely chuck anybody out of a ring, but he moves so slowly it was hard to get excited about the potential. We'd seen it all before. The ending salvaged proceedings because The Undertaker won his first and only Rumble in a move that was supported by those in attendance that night, but just minutes before then, this down spot lowered heads around the world, even more so as RVD had been the WWE Champion just months earlier. Oh, how things can change. Number 9, the Brian Kendrick. Birth, school, taxes, death, and Triple H throwing wrestlers like Brian Kendrick out the Rumble in 2009. These are just the things we all have to experience in life, and it shouldn't come as any sort of surprise, especially here. The game's story that night was to get all the way to the end of the match before being thrown out by Randy Orton, his long-term rival, and his penciled-in WrestleMania opponent. With that in mind, no one else stood a chance. Even still, someone like Kendrick deserved at least a little run a decade ago when his name was called at number 26. Within about 15 seconds, he found himself back on the floor after Triple H had spied Brian from afar and pedigreed his ass out of there. It was another story of falling from grace as back in 2008, Brian Kendrick had been in a world title match. He was able to eliminate Kofi Kingston before his own dismissal, but if you had been guest booking before the opening bell, I don't think anybody expected Brian to be treated as if he was just a jobber. Number 8, The Rock. 2001 was a wonderful time for wrestling fans. Not only was Austin still a beloved figure, but The Rock had pulled himself up too and was arguably on equal footing. Throw in that by this point their storied rivalry was cemented in time, and there was something magical to see them stare each other down as the Royal Rumble slowly came to a close. The man to ruin that was Kane. While still a monster back then, no one really wanted to see the Big Red Machine at that specific moment. They were more interested in two legends going toe-to-toe in a different environment. Rocky realised this too as he threw Kane through the second rope, but as we know that means nothing here, it's top rope or nothing. So as the Great One was about to do away with the rattlesnake, Kane emerged from the ashes and dumped him out instead, leaving Austin and Taker's brother to fight it out for a spot at WrestleMania 17. Not a bad story all things considered, but the fans didn't agree. As soon as the Brahma Bull had been eliminated, they made it very clear that is not what they wanted. It also left it obvious who was going to win. When the Great One was in there, you could play with the idea it could go to him, but as soon as Kane took his place, Austin was a lock. You'd have been right too, as Stone Cold did win his third and final Royal Rumble before going heel a few months later. Oh yeah. Number 7, Owen Hart. The 1998 Rumble took place just 2 months after the infamous Montreal Screwjob. In hindsight, we should have known what could have happened, but maybe it was just easier to hope that Owen Hart would finally be given his due. Although Owen had been feuding with DX, which made sense all things considered, seeing Triple H, who wasn't even in the thing, be the reason he lost was like an extra kick in the teeth. If only we'd known. It was odd too, as there was a glimpse of hope to begin with. Although Jeff Jarrett clocked Hart and stole his Rumble spot, Owen returned later to get his revenge and hint that maybe WWE had bigger plans on this night. Instead, after playing tug of war with one of Triple H's crutches, the game was on the outside watching China tangle with Owen, Trips smashed Hart with his other crutch, which caused enough momentum to send him to the outside. It was just sad really during a time where a lot of confusion rained down on the WWE. Not that they didn't come out at the end with more success than ever. If only Owen had received a similar serving of fortune. Number 6, Shawn Michaels. We focus on the word infuriated during this list, but when that's the emotion you're going for and you get it, doesn't even matter how upset the fans are on a cold night in January. If that's the plan and it's going to be paid off at WrestleMania, then there's nothing wrong with it at all. Welcome to 2003. It started with a bang because HBK did enter at number 1. When number 2 was Chris Jericho, expectations went through the roof. The seeds for this feud had already been laid, so what WWE would do with the pair at the Rumble was anybody's guess. I don't think anybody thought it would result in Michaels being thrown out in minutes. Tricked by Jericho, who had Christian dress up as Y2J during his entrance, the now AEW man jumped Shawn from behind and kicked the crap out of him. He even hit him with a steel chair. That left Michaels as easy pickings and Jericho tossed him out before we'd even begun. It was a fantastic angle that would build to an even better encounter at Mania where Shawn got his revenge, and that was only helped because of how mad fans were on this evening. They wanted revenge, and Michaels gave it to them months later. Number 5, The Undertaker. While an absolute hero of pro wrestling, back in 1993, The Undertaker didn't have a lot to work with. Vince McMahon's idea was to get bigger and bigger physical foes to try and assert their dominance against the dead man, hoping the audience would question just how he would overcome the odds. It was a tried and tested system, but it was never going to work when the giant Gonzalez arrived. He at least had to look credible. Instead, Mr. Gonzalez wore the most daft ring attire you've ever seen, even had fake fur attached to it, and proceeded to win over absolutely no one. He did look intimidating as he towered over Taker, but even then it wasn't believable. Some things just don't click. The real shame here was that the Giant wasn't even in the match to begin with. He just appeared, eliminated the Phenom, and then went about his business. That's always ridiculous, as how can that be legal, but it was doubly bad because a fan favourite had just been screwed out of a potential victory. It dropped further when they clashed at WrestleMania, but we don't have to focus on that today, so let's not. Number 4, The Undertaker. Again, another surprise that for my money worked, or at least at the time. Seeing Maven of all people be responsible for getting rid of The Undertaker at the 2002 Royal Rumble is still something longtime fans talk about today. A reality show winner knocking out a mainstay of the WWE scene was unreal. Fans reacted accordingly, which was a mixture of shock, awe and rage, depending on how you saw it. It was by no means a clean elimination. Distracted by the Hardy Boys, Taker had his back to the tough enough winner, who took his opportunity to dropkick Taker over the top rope as what happened slowly dawned on the multiple-time world champion. He was beyond pissed and absolutely destroyed Maven afterwards, ensuring no one thought this was a changing of the guard. And as we know, Maven wasn't long for the wrestling world. He was gone a year or so later. If that hadn't been the case though and he'd made his mark, we could have looked back on this as a real turning point. You don't need to now. Number 3, Dolph Ziggler. The 2015 Rumble will forever be one that raises the eyebrows. Booked as the Roman Reigns show, WWE decided to double down on 2 heels it knew fans wouldn't want to see win in order to hopefully get a big reaction when the big dog finally won. That failed as we know, but there were other negatives before we got to the end, namely when it came to Dolph Ziggler. As the crowd had to endure Kane and Show slowly going through the pack, the arrival of Ziggler sparked some hope in the crowd. Maybe Dolph would lift this Rumble and even finally get his due. Such thinking was nonsense, of course, and after a knockout punch he became more fodder for the Giants. When Bray Wyatt suffered the same fate, it was another nail in that year's coffin. By its conclusion, the audience was booing like crazy, and Philadelphia will always be remembered for how they absolutely hated this show. Shame really, as if it had have worked, it could have cemented Roman on the throne, but we all know how that went. Number 2, Steve Austin. 1999 was nuts. While Stone Cold vs Mr. McMahon raged on, it's also the year when the train slowed down a little, probably because Vinnie Mac became the WWE Champion. He also won that year's Royal Rumble. There was something awesome about all this though, especially as McMahon flaunted it exactly like he should have done. There is a reason he's in the debate for one of the best heels in history. With a perfect babyface to bounce off, he managed to piss everybody off constantly. Focusing on that Rumble win, it was all just so nuts. Vince and Austin started as number 1 and number 2 with the Rattlesnake pulverizing the crap out of his nemesis before vanishing for a while to let the rest of the match play out. Although that did allow McMahon to go back to his commentary roots, which is wonderful in and of itself. It was pretty clear that everything between was just a waiting game until the rivals re-entered the ring, but not many called the finish, which yes saw The Rock distract Austin from the outside, allowing McMahon to tip Stone Cold over the top and claim victory. Fans in attendance that night were almost too surprised to be angry, but given how popular Austin was, they were still mad they weren't able to celebrate with their hero. It was a brilliant piece of storytelling, however, as not only did it make McMahon a bigger heel, but also rallied the troops further behind Austin as he now had to find a new way to the WrestleMania main event. Excellent. Number 1, Roman Reigns. We all forget about this because of everything else that's happened, but the 2014 Royal Rumble had more going on than just the anger around Daniel Bryan not appearing and Rey Mysterio having to get the brunt of it when he arrived in the number 30 spot. The real story was that of Batista and Roman Reigns. Meant to be the returning hero and a proper legend who could help WrestleMania 30 pull a big buy rate, the crowd on this evening decided they didn't care for Big Dave's in-ring comeback and would rather cheer someone else entirely, namely Roman. When it was just these two left, the audience was squarely behind the Shield man, so when Batista reversed him and threw him out, it blew a gasket on the place. The crowd booed as if they'd been slapped around the face by management, and genuinely, if WWE had pulled the trigger here with Roman, everybody would have loved it. Just think of that. It would have set the world on fire, which is exactly what the company did want 12 months later. You can't write this stuff.